then he grabbed the flashlight. He started blinking this flashlight at this craft. And so we walked up into this empty lot, which was right above my house in my backyard. So this UFO was hovering right over my backyard, about 70 feet up. And so we stood there looking at this thing, and we pinched each other because we couldn't believe what we saw. Well, what we saw was a disc object that was about 30 feet wide, looked like it was about 10 feet tall, and it was kind of like at the bottom it was blackened. There was windows in it. Touched my buddy on the shoulder and said, "Man, I hope they don't look out. I don't want to see what they look like."
Alien abduction is something we talk about on the show frequently, but unless you've been there and done that, it's really hard to understand how it changes the direction of someone's life. Tonight, Dave Emmons gives us a view into his world, a world of alien visitation, abduction, and the unexplained. That and more is coming right up on My Alien Life. My Alien Life is recorded live from atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is available on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is at www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you will find my email address, all previously recorded shows, and more. I am Cameron Brower. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two, one, zero, and liftoff.
Tonight in the studio, I'm joined by Dave Emmons, who will share his alien life and experiences. Dave has had some very unique sightings and interactions with extraterrestrials for decades now. Dave Emmons, thank you so much for sharing, and welcome.
Thank you, Cameron, and thank you for having me on your show.
You bet, man. It's nice to finally meet you, hear your voice. You and I, we've been communicating now for a few months, and you've let me in on a few of your amazing life experiences, and first of all, give our listeners just a couple of minutes of who you are and what you do and why we're talking tonight.
Okay, I started, it was in high school. When I was 14 years of age, I saw my first UFO.
Where did you grow up, Dave?
In Alton, Illinois.
Gotcha.
And I graduated from high school on the honor roll. I have a 138 IQ. And then I went to the military. I got in there and I was able to take anything I wanted. I performed so well on the test that I was able to pick and choose anything. So I went into nuclear weapons. So it took me 6 months to get a top secret security clearance. Once I got that, I went to Huntsville, Alabama, and I took classes there. I didn't like it. I was only 19, about ready to turn 20, and I didn't really like it because every weekend we had military intelligence people ask us questions, give us cigarettes, and talk to us. And I figured, well, I'm going to end up in Sandia in some underground tunnel there. And at that age, I was a little afraid of that. So I actually went to the post chaplain to get me out of the class because I had an 89% average. And most of these guys in the class had master's degrees. And I was the only high school student in there, myself and another guy. And we were the only two without the master's degree. And these guys, and I hung in there as long as I could, and I thought I did a good job, but I didn't like it. So I got out of that. I went into another training, and I ended up in Vietnam. I was a platoon sergeant. And then at the end of my stay in the military, before I got out, they were going to give me a commission, a lieutenant. So I didn't take that. I didn't stay in. That was another turn in the road that I took, but I didn't like that. After that, I got out and worked, went to school part-time, and then I played music about 3 nights a week, So I was working and playing music and going to school for about all through the 70s and part of the 80s. And I got 5 years of college, journalism, and I got into being an electrician. I managed businesses, small businesses, and then I got into owning my own restaurant and nightclub. That didn't work out so well for me, so I went and worked for a refinery. I was a lead person there, a supervisor, and did all right there. And then I got out of that, and then I went and worked with another small business, and then I went into the Red Cross and done some work there. I've done a lot of work with the Red Cross, but overall, that's part of my background, and journalism is part of it too, because I love taking pictures. I've taken a lot of pictures out west in Sedona, and I love music, of course, and I love all the other things that everybody else would like, but apparently the ET started on me early, and I was 14 years of age with another buddy who was 13 at the time, one of my best friends, and we saw this thing. And I can start telling that story if you're ready.
So basically, as far as you know, you started experiencing alien visitation, seeing UFOs at right around your early teens, 14 years old.
Right. That's right. I was, for everybody who's trying to figure out my age, I was in 1963.
So not that long ago. That's okay, like right. That's like the height of UFO activity back then, and you know, I was born in 1965 in Montana, and you know, in the mid 70s, mid 60s through the mid 70s, you know, it was a big deal. So what was your first experience like?
All right, this was a warm summer evening. It was about 10:30 at night. My buddy and I were sipping on a Pepsi, a glass bottle Pepsi, that is, and we listened to a 10 transistor radio, and we heard the radio starting to snap and pop. And I asked my friend, I said, "Did you change batteries?" He said, "Oh yes." He said, "Nothing's wrong with it." And then I smelled something that smelled like sulfur. And later on, I'll tell you what that really is. After some years of looking at it and researching, I found out that it was ozone. But we smelled the smell, and then we saw these two white lights. They were two bright lights. They didn't light up the neighborhood at all. There wasn't any lights. I think they were coming in. They were really low. It was only about 70 feet up. And so we went up on the street. We were downstairs where he had a basement apartment with his dad. So we went upstairs on the street, and then he grabbed the flashlight. He started blinking this flashlight at this craft. And so we walked up into this empty lot, in which was right above my house in my backyard. So this UFO was hovering right over my backyard, about 70 feet up. And so we stood there looking at this thing, and we pinched each other because we couldn't believe what we saw. Well, what we saw was a disc object that was about 30 feet wide, looked like it was about 10 feet tall, and it was kind of like at the bottom it was blackened, like maybe it comes through the atmosphere, and that's where the sulfur smell, the ozone smell happens. Ozone happens when you have heat coming through the atmosphere, and there's H2O, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and nitrogen and hydrogen that all burns in the atmosphere. So that makes up ozone when it comes through. So that's what I figured out later. But this thing looked like a bubble top, like these old time tops that you took and you wound them up by pushing down on a I guess it was a screw looking device that you drove the top and you spun it and you let it go. Well, it looked like that, kind of like a chubby flying saucer. It had 3 layers. The first layer was, of course, where the dark area was at the bottom. And then the second layer, there was windows in it, ports that they can look out of. And I touched my buddy on the shoulder. I said, "Man, I hope they don't look out. I don't want to see what they look like." We were both a little afraid. And so we stood there for a little while longer, and we looked at it. We both were telling each other what we were seeing to make sure that we were both seeing the same thing. And we did. And at the top, there's a little bulb at the top, and it had 2 antennas sticking out of the top. And then there was a little red light towards the top. And so he heard a hissing sound, I didn't pay any attention to the hissing sound. I guess I was locked into the portals, the windows, and I was, waiting to see what was in this craft. Well, we stood there for a while, and we lost track of time. From 10:30 until about midnight, we still to this day we talk about it when we get together, and we'll mention that, and then we still can't figure out the time, an hour and a half or whatever it was in that time. Because when I walked in the house, my mom was mad, and I told her, I said, I saw a UFO. She said, I'll UFO your butt. You get the house yet and lock the door. So it was late.
Good answer.
And that was one of the points that I told you about, the negative report I got. That was one of the points I had, because my mom, she believes in UFOs because the family has had UFO sightings in her backyard, and she said she has seen things in her lifetime. She's seen like tall, dark figures walking into her room and things of this nature. So the negative report I got is, well, why was she upset with you when you come in when you said about UFOs? I said, because she wasn't upset about the UFO. She believes that. Because she warned us not to get around or go outside because UFOs were prevalent. You and I just spoke about that back in the 50s. A lot of people were afraid of them. They didn't know what they were. So to finish off what we were seeing, this thing nobody ever looked out, but we felt like something must have happened because of the lost time from 10:30 to about midnight, and also the fact I redrew that incident. And it's funny how if you take pictures or if you redraw something, then it all comes back to you. Well, this thing was actually, we were facing it towards the southwest. And when it took off, it took out due west. We didn't see it move about 60 degrees, something like that. We didn't see it move. Consciously, we didn't see it move. But when it took off into the clouds, it took off straight west. So it must have made some movement or whatever, and we didn't see it move. And that was one of the questions I had also about that incident. So him and I still to this day, we talk about it, and he become a police chief, and I, of course, you heard about my background. But both of us neither one of us lie. We're pretty forthright and honest. So his story and my story matched up. But like I said, we still can't figure out the lost time.
So at the time, did you both agree that you're seeing something from another planet, another dimension, another time? Did the word flying saucer, did the word alien come up? What was the discussion like when you're seeing this?
We said it was a flying saucer. We watched horror movies on, It Come From Mars and stuff like that, and we saw the flying saucer. We knew what it was from the movies. You can take that, you can take that with a grain of salt, whatever, but we knew it was a flying saucer. We both kind of detailed it together, what it looked like, and the lost time and everything. So yes, we called it a UFO. We knew at first we knew what it was because we pinched each other to see if we were both seeing the same thing and how odd it was. In 1963, we didn't have the advanced aircraft that we do now. Now they're talking about the TR-3 triangle craft being a military craft. It could be mistaken for a triangle UFO craft or ET craft. But back then, there wasn't any technology that would do that. Didn't have no sound. It was 70 feet above, and it was low. And I'm sure that something happened, and I had a regression. I didn't have much of a regression that I know of unless I go back. And I had a couple of things happen that in my dreams in which were regressed. I don't like hypnosis. I had an experienced hypnosis person tried to hypnotize me, and it backfired. She was the one who got hypnotized. But getting back to the regressions, I usually get like bits and pieces. They can erase your memory, and how they do it, I might get into that later, and I've seen how they do it. They can't get everything. Sometimes there's bits and pieces that you'll have a dream. So I had a dream of being on this metal table. It was shiny, and I was sitting there really groggy, and I was trying to put on a shirt. The shirt was too small for me. I was a chubby guy, and my friend was a skinny guy, so they had our shirts mixed up. So I was trying to put on his shirt, and finally, apparently, we both got our clothes together, and we got dressed, and we ended up in the same place, standing there in that empty lot, not knowing what happened. And we looked at each other, and my friend said, "I'm going to go home and tell my dad." And I said, "Yeah, I want to tell my mom." And so we took off and went home. And that's when, I got in trouble, and I guess they told him, "Go on to bed. Son, you're seeing things." Back then, a lot of people didn't really, we got about 45% of people who believe in UFOs now. Back then, it wasn't really that prevalent. There wasn't enough media covering it, like Ancient Aliens or radio programs like this one here. But we knew we saw something really special, and that was something that stuck with us all of our lives and still does. If he was here with me, he'd tell you the same story. But I always have to have backup facts. Needless to say, it's some of the negative things that can be said about people having these experiences. You can't prove it. And you know who I'm talking about. Don't want to mention names. But this happened to me about a month later. This was in my left testicle. I looked down and I felt something round underneath the skin. And I noticed a thin red line that looked like it was kind of cut. Very, I guess it was just really thin. And I thought, okay, maybe I can push what that is out through that thin line. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and I finally got it out. It was in a tan ash color, and it was about the size of a small, I guess, M&M, one of these real small ones. And it was like a disc shape itself. And I had it in my hand finally, and there wasn't any blood. No blood was coming from it before or after I pushed this thing out. And I showed it to my mom, and I said, "Mom, I got this out of my my sack." But she says, "Oh, throw that away. That's probably just an embedded blackhead." I said, "No, Mom." And she looked at me funny. I said, "There was a cut line in it." I said, "A red line that was cut with this thing went in through that red line, and I got it back out through that red line." And then she looks at me funny, and she goes, "Throw it away anyway." So I think what happened was that she was thinking that, okay, that UFO stunt she thought I played about a month earlier, and this thing, this implant, whatever, she didn't want to scare me by coming out and talking about it. She just said, "Throw it away and go on out and play whatever you're going to do." And she was I saw that she was kind of dumbfounded. I even asked her to this day. She's 92 years of age, and she's seen several UFOs herself, like I said. So she asked me, and we were just talking this afternoon. She asked me that I should keep doing radio about UFOs. So that's how much she's into this. But I was told by one other interview, since you know this person, I won't say names, but said, why would your mother be mad if she saw UFOs? Well, I just explained to you why. She didn't want to scare me by her stories. She never told me these stories until later on in life. So this is how I found out about it. And that's why she's interested in me doing UFO talk radio to get the word out.
Absolutely. And I understand that. I don't really like to talk about that subject at all with my kids. I kind of keep that separate, but, so this is sort of my outlet as well. And I was thinking when you were telling this story, when you and your buddy first spotted this craft, you hung in there, right? I mean, you stayed there, you watched it. Was there any fear involved?
Right. Yeah, we didn't run. I don't know if we could have run if we had to or not. We were just stuck there. And it seemed like, I don't know, there was a funny feeling that come over me. And now, after being dumbed down by magnetic energy, I know what that is. I know now. I can look back on my other incidents after I figured out what they do to you and how they do things. So it's after you've been through, I've seen 5 up close UFOs. I can get to each one of them. But in between time, there's always something that has to happen for me. Now that I was a trained journalist, that I always have to follow up and make sure something else happens that proves the first point. You have to have a secondary fact for me. Even some of the incidents I've had, like the first UFO I saw when I was 14, the follow-up incident was that little implant in my testicle. And that was a follow-up fact that told me I was on board ship. I got implanted there. They might have taken semen samples. I guess at that time I was of age, but they might have done other things, blood tests, whatever. I didn't notice any marks. As a kid, you don't pay any attention to marks because we run through blackberry patches and everything back in those days. We were kind of like city kids, but my dad was a country boy, so we more or less grew up country with him, and we'd go hunting and we'd go through the briar patches, and so we had all kinds of marks on it. So we didn't pay any attention to the marks. Matter of fact, I wouldn't have known to look for any marks at that age. So these are things that is hard to prove when you look back at. I'm just glad I got a witness, myself and my buddy, on the first UFO sighting I've had.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's we did grow up with especially me where I grew up, we were probably playing outside most of our lives. It wasn't like kids now where you're indoors most of the time. But back in the day, you come back in, you're all cut up, you're bruised, you're beat up, but you had this lost time, which was like an hour and a half or something like that. Any indication, any regression from that? And do you feel that that's when the implant happened, or was it later on?
Okay. Yeah, the regression I had didn't come until I'd say about 25 years later. This is kind of weird. And I didn't figure out it was the regression from that time or not, but I ended up in another world. It had two suns, and it had green trees like evergreens, and it was kind of looked like Earth, and it had a river. And since I played drums even at an early age, I kind of knew what drums were. But when I saw this set of drums in this apartment-like building, and it was an apartment-like building that housed people that worked in a mine, some kind of a mine, and I saw that the drum mechanical devices were different than what we had here on Earth. I walked out. After that, I walked out to that room, and I walked down this plank in the stairs, and I sat by this young girl. And so this told me that I was young at that age too. And then I saw these other younger people kind of playing in this lumber yard or whatever. I looked to my left, and I saw these guys come up out of the ground. They were walking up out of the ground, and they had this black tar substance on them. And I thought, wow, where am I at? And I saw these two suns, and I turned to this girl, probably in fear, because the first thing that came to mind was, I asked her, do you believe in God? And then when I asked her that question, she looked at me funny, and then she looked over my head, and I turned and looked, and there was a guy dressed in black. And I didn't notice he had a hat or not, but he was dressed in black. He motioned for me to come over to him. So I walk over to him, and he says, walk down that plank. And he says, you have to go now. And so I walk down the plank, and then I come back to myself in bed. But this was 20-something years later that I had that regress dream. I have a ledger. It's got about 260 pages of notes, typewritten notes that I keep, and I was thinking about writing a book. I still might do that. That's why I'm not selling any book here on the air. I don't have a book just yet, but I do have the manuscripts ready to go. But that dream had to have been a regress dream, that this, whatever happened, took me to another planet, just even for an hour and a half. An hour and a half here could be like 3 days in outer space due to the time differences. You've probably seen some movies, Cameron, that these people would go into outer space, and they would spend, maybe they thought was a year, and they come back, it ends up being 50 years. So there is no time element. There's a different time element or whatever the further you go out in space. But I knew that there was something special about that, and I had people tell me, if you ever had a dream that you were on a planet with two suns, then you actually were on that planet. For some reason, some of these the spiritualists or some of the people who told me this said that makes it a fact that you've been there because there was two suns. I guess that's a given in some people's terminology. But I didn't really know. But I knew that when the guys walked up out of there, they looked human. They had this black stuff all over them, and they were mining something. I don't know if it didn't look like coal. It looked like tar or whatever. I don't know what they were mining, but that was one of the regressed dreams that I had. It might have coincided with the age that I was at 14 when I saw my first UFO.
Interesting, Dave. So what do you think they wanted? I mean, why? Obviously, they show up. Took a lot of effort to get there, right? And a lot of fuel, whatever they,
Well,
a lot of element 115. But what do they want when they get there?
Well, to tell you the truth, they don't have to travel that far. I think they're using wormholes, dimensional jumps, because there's a lot of dimensional stuff that goes on. And I've got some other things that's happened, and stuff that happens to my wife and I all the time. Some weird things that go on, and which tells me Grant Cameron he's doing a study on aports. These are little things that you get that come out of nowhere. You find them at your feet, and I have 4 plastic discs that I found, 2 of them in Illinois, 2 in Fairbanks, Alaska, when my wife went to work up there for the DOD in the energy area, and she was a consultant. So I went with her up there. We spent 2 years up in Alaska, and I found 2 discs up there. So it doesn't matter where you go. They follow you wherever you go. And I've had other things like little rocks show up. I picked a quarter up one time, and then the next day it was in my car on a floorboard. And the next day I went there, and a pretty little rock sitting in place of that quarter. And I thought, where did that come from? And these are aports that I don't know if you know Grant Cameron. He's doing
Sure.
a big study on that. Yeah. And I'm interested in his findings. He just posted something on Facebook, and I told him, I said, I'd like to know, what your final, he's doing some experiments now. And I told him, I want to know about this paranormal stuff that happens, like aports coming through dimensional. He actually was alluding to the fact that people who are abducted get this third eye energy, and it actually turns into telekinesis. And you're actually drawing these things through the dimensional barriers. That's interesting. I want to find out more about that, because I still have several thoughts about that aliens could be planting them there. Aliens can be invisible. Why they come here? One of the questions you asked, I get blowing wind here. Why I think they come here? I think there's, I'd say 5 or 6 species that are working with our government, and they're working with them, and they're feeding them technology, and they're allowing them to have some freedom doing, I guess, physicals on it, and taking DNA. And there's the Greys and the Nordics have a big play into this. They're the ones who actually, you've heard of back in ancient Iraq, Sumeria, and an Anunnaki. Those 65,000 years ago, they started experimenting with our DNA. So they're the ones who made modern man. So they're actually watching us and, in a way, protecting us, because one of the, defense people out of Canada, I can't think of his name. He's the one who said there's something like 50-something species of aliens who've visited this planet, and only about 5 or 6 of them are working with it. So they're actually protecting us in a way, and we're kind of a project that they put together, and that they have to come here and check on our DNA, and they keep track of us. It's weird. Some people ask why certain families and why others, because I think they're following a DNA line that they're checking on and see how it evolves. So that's part of the theory that I'm thinking that they're doing. And they don't want us to blow each other up. It's quite obvious because of some of the sightings they've had over nuclear missile facilities in which they actually shut down all the electronics. So they don't want us to be playing with nuclear weapons.
So you don't think that this is a super technology that's coming to visit us to check up on our technology? It's more of an experiment of what we are and what we've become, rather than what they can get from us technologically.
They keep track of. Well, yeah, they keep track of our technology. That's one of the important things they do, and that's why they watch the space station, and they've seen a lot of UFOs up there.
Don't you think that would be, a real dull technology for something, so advanced?
Could you repeat that? I didn't get that, Cameron.
Wouldn't you think that would be such a dull technology for a species that's so advanced technologically?
A dull?
A dull, DULL. Yeah, unimpressive. Let's put it that way.
It would be unimpressive to them, but they're keeping track of our evolution, right, and technology and our DNA. So that's why they're keeping track of us. We're kind of like, I guess somebody put it like we're in an aquarium and they're watching us, and they created all these different animals and like Noah's Ark. There's a lot to talk about when you go back in time. I have a lot of theories on that. They're only theories. Everybody has theories, and everybody has an opinion, I guess. So my opinion can only come from my experiences. But that's where I'm at with it. I think they're just watching us. They're taking DNA from us. Some people say, well, their race, their civilization is dying out. They need new blood or new DNA to make the hybrids. And the hybrids right now, I think they're making hybrids with us human beings, and we're evolving. And as we evolve, these hybrids one day, and it's a gradual change. We're not even noticing it, really. It's like technology is expanding and growing and evolving, and we're not paying much attention to it. But you can see these 5, 6-year-old kids who can play these piano like Mozart, and they can sing, and they can do computers, and they're really smart. We're evolving. There's more and more of that going on now, and so it has to be with the DNA changes and with us evolving. So they're keeping track of that. That'd be my opinion, I guess, from my experiences.
You mentioned the government. Do you feel the government is fully knowledgeable about this? Or, in my opinion, I think the government is in the dark just like we are, but you don't think that. So exactly what do they know, and what part of the government knows this information?
Okay. I don't know. I can't remember his name. He was a defense official in Canada. Was it Hotmeyer or something like that? He's the one who came out and disclosed this information that the governments know the species that are working with us, the tall whites, the Nordics, and the Greys. They're working out out west. I don't want to say what places. I don't want to be too descriptive because I really don't know, but I know that, yes, I think the government knows. I think Cheney and Rumsfeld and also old man Bush, I think they all knew what was going on. And Eisenhower actually knew what was going on. His great-granddaughter actually comes on some of these shows and talks about what her great-granddad saw, Dwight Eisenhower. He met with the aliens on a tarmac at the Edwards Air Force Base out in California. He was gone a whole day. And actually, the people in Washington, D.C. were concerned. And he took off. He only had 1 or 2 secret people with him, and he went to the Edwards Air Force Base. And there was a day that he was missing, and what he was doing was meeting with these tall aliens on the tarmac. And they were drawing up some kind of deal. And this is what his great-granddaughter is saying. I just saw her last week on the show repeating the same thing, that she heard that that's what happened, that Dwight Eisenhower met with him. And even Truman knew about him. Of course, Truman, they started that group, the Majestic 12, and that's what they started that group for, was to work with aliens and research aliens, and at the same time spread disinformation, like Project Blue Book. It was actually supposed to be spreading disinformation to us to throw us off track, so we wouldn't think of UFOs. And then Hynek changed his mind about all of it, and he said they exist. And you know the story from there. He started writing books and speaking, and he said that they do exist and that they were just covering up at the time. So that's why I think the government knows something about it, and I think they do now. I mean, I don't know how high. They told the president, I think it was President Reagan or something, or one of them, they said that you don't have a high enough top secret level. I think it's level 27, and the president has about a level 18 or 19. And of course, he pretty much knows everything, but they don't get involved in the day-to-day routine of a lot of the things that they know that are what they call crypto secrets, and which is dealing with the ETs and the UFOs.
Is there some kind of advantage to keeping ETs secret, or is the government making a mistake when they keep this all to themselves?
Well, here's what would happen, Cameron, and I believe this wholeheartedly. We have a religious structure, the different religions, Catholic, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Buddha, and if they knew that there's life out there and that they were working with us, that would kind of make the religious area, or the people that are involved in religion, it would tear their world apart, because even the Christian Bible says that God made man, and he didn't make anybody else. We're the only life in the universe. And that's what we're taught. But that's not really true. But if people found it out for certain, like if the president come out and made a speech about it and told the people, there'd be a lot of people that would really be a little bit, I guess, crazy. So back in the 30s, in 36 or 38, somewhere in there, when they had this Martian invasion, this story on the radio, and a lot of people started believing that we were being attacked by Martians, and people were jumping off of buildings. So that kind of previewed the government in what could happen if people really knew this for sure. We don't know for sure, and I know for sure because I've seen them. But people who haven't seen them, who have never seen a UFO, they wouldn't believe it until they saw one, and that's fine, as long as they don't think the people that have seen them are crazy. That's fine with me, just as long as they say, well, if I see one, I'll believe it, and I'll give it to them. You know, that's fine. But I think we're seeing more and more today, more than we ever are. But I think probably half of them could be our military technology, that some of these craft are that we're seeing.
So do you feel we need disclosure from the government? I mean, is this something that you personally need, or do you feel that as a nation that we need disclosure?
I think it's time for the people to know, because a lot of tax dollars, $450 billion is going into black ops every year, and the Congress can't even ask about it. A lot of tax money is being spent. I think the people have a right to know where we're at in the research and the study of ETs and UFOs. Maybe because right now we can't defend ourselves against them because they're highly technical. And you were just saying a while ago, our technology is boring or dull to them, and that's true. But that's the reason why the government can't admit it, because they can't protect us from the ETs in case they ever wanted to, full-fledged attack. I don't think that'll ever happen, to tell you the truth. I think they have a different way of doing things with us. I think the evolving, them working with us and watching us, monitoring us, I think they're doing this for a reason. It's going to be a slow outcome, just like thousands of years of mankind evolving. I think now we're evolving with ET assistance, and we're evolving slowly. So nobody really notices it that much. But if you take a look at how far advanced we've gotten since Roswell crash and other crashes back in the 40s, other than Roswell wasn't the only one, but a lot of back engineering was done. And so we've kind of, in the last 50 years, I mean, look at where we're at. When I was a kid, we were just talking about that. All we had was a 10 transistor radio when we played outside. Now they have the computers, they have cell phones, they have video games, everything to with technology. TV's even expanded from 3 stations to about 500 stations. So it's really become, we've really blown up in the past 50 years with technology. And we need to have maybe a slower rate because the kids are really getting into the computer so much that they've lost track of being human.
Yeah, I think we kind of have lost track of being human a little bit. Do you think that there are people out there trying to pass themselves off as experiencers, but they're really disinformation specialists?
Yes, I do. I think there's a mix of all types. I also, there's a certain number of people. I guess I don't like saying this since I'm an experiencer. I don't want to knock other people's beliefs or what they feel that they've seen or done in the past, but some of this stuff could be cerebral. That's why I told you a while ago that I need a follow-up fact to try to figure out what happened. Some of the stuff can be dreamed up. You can put yourself into a trance. And I've talked to people who are into the spirituality thing. They're into the new wave consciousness. And a lot of times they can sit there in their office chair and they said they can go to Atlanta. Those are kind of like with the mind. That's the mind doing a lot of that, dreaming things up. And we got to be careful that we've got to know for sure, and there's got to be some facts. You've got to see things up front, conscious. I was conscious on everything that's happened to me, except for the regressed dreams I had that actually told me the story or some of the stuff that they didn't erase that come through in my regressions, and I took notes and I wrote it all down. But yes, we got to be careful. There's disinformation out there, and I ran into one guy I think and I talked about that earlier. But I'm not saying that that everybody that's an experiencer. It's just like right now with Travis Walton. There's some people saying that he's not telling the truth, and his story's been out there for 30, 40 years, and he's went through about a dozen lie detector tests. This one certain fellow that I talked to you about earlier actually said, Travis Walton, he said, you can take as many as lie detector tests you want, and you can pass them all. He said they're easy to pass. And he said, what makes you think Travis Walton is for real? This comes from the same guy we just talked about. I don't want to mention names, but he got into that even. I said, wait a minute, I met Travis 3 times, talked to him at length, watched a couple of his conferences, and I believe the guy. And, you can't keep pushing for 30, 40 years the same story without believing it, just like me. I was 14, and I remember that story just like it just happened yesterday because it was so real and so shocking at the time. But it's hard for an experiencer to talk down about another experiencer, especially when David Jacobs and Hopkins both they were involved in MAC, also was involved in research. And I talked to David Jacobs one time at a conference, and I told him about my abduction one night, being hit with electricity all over my body and being frozen. And he told me that he said, half the people that has been abducted, they don't even know it. He says, I said, really? He said, yes. He said, I've interviewed, over 10,000 people. And he said, half of them don't even know they've been abducted. They know that something strange happened to them. When they wake up, they say, wow, what was that? And they shake it off and they shave and they go to work, or whatever, they crimp up and go to work. But that tells me a lot, that there's a lot of abductions that are occurring with all of us humans that we don't even know it. So how are we, or how am I to say that somebody else's story or event is not true? And because they can turn to me and say, well, we don't believe your events either. So it comes to a shove and push or whatever. But I think there is disinformation, yes. I think you'll find it on Facebook a lot of times. You'll see some things in there that are like computer drawn spacecraft in a picture, and you'll know they're computer graphics. And that's disinformation. That's what they've been doing. They'll put those in there, and they'll have people pass them around and say, "Hey, look, here's the UFO," and then sooner or later you'll find out that it was computer graphics. So, I don't know. I don't know who. Sometimes if you spent time with a person, I think you can tell, or I can tell by asking certain questions. There's feelings actually that come with these abductions. And some of the things they're just not what you see with your eye. It's how you feel. I felt dizzy. I felt nauseous. I felt out of place. I didn't know where I was at. This is magnetic energy.
You just described to me every day of my life so far. but no, I got you. It's so after that initial incident with you and your buddy where you saw a UFO, and it was pretty profound, pretty amazing. What happened next? I mean, what's your next most vivid memory of an interaction with ET?
Okay, actually, for 20 years after that, I played music. I partied a lot. I didn't do drugs as a musician, but I drank. And I played music, went to school, worked 5, sometimes 6 days a week until I passed out in front of the mirror shaving one morning. And the doctor told me I had to kind of cut back on something. So I was so busy that I didn't really realize what was going on. I wouldn't have known if I was abducted or not. I was probably drunk. If I was abducted in the 70s and 80s, I partied a lot. But I finished my education, of course, and then I worked. I did my job, and so I was a good citizen, I guess you could say, good taxpayer. So, but the next thing, I saw things in the sky. I look up and I saw these orbs. Now, orbs to me don't mean much because we don't really know what orbs are. So when I see a story about orbs over a city, or if I see orbs myself, if they don't behave in an erratic way, then I don't believe that they're ET related. But what actually happened to me, the next thing that happened to me that I was very conscious about, and it was in 96, 95 or 96. I'll have to check my notes. And I was with my ex-wife. We lived in Godfrey, Illinois, not too far from Alton, where I saw the first UFO. There was a shadow that come across the mirror at the foot of our bed, and I thought it was my daughter who'd come into our bathroom, the master bed bathroom, to get some aspirins for a headache. So I called out her name. I was on my elbow, and I looked up and I called out her name a couple of times, and then this dark figure come around the end of the bed. My wife liked it dark in there so she could sleep better for work. So I said, okay, fine, we'll have it really dark. And so this thing walked around to my side of the bed. It's only about 3.5 feet tall, 4 feet maybe at the most. And I looked at it right in the face. It had big eyes, but I could see the pupils. It didn't have the black lenses on. This was weird. It was a little gray-green guy or whoever, entity, and he had a lot of wrinkles, and he looked uglier than the commercial aliens you see on TV or the smooth skin aliens. This one was really wrinkled and kind of a gray-green color, and his eyes were big, and they had white pupils on them, and he had a dark spot in the center just like we do, the iris and everything. But he looked at me, and I remember fear for about 5 or 6 seconds, and I went over to my other elbow and kind of leaned at him and looked at him, and I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen next. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel anything. I felt very relaxed, very comfortable, and I laid back down and went to bed. Well, a couple hours later, I got up and my eyes were really twitching, like something, I don't know, like something electrified my eyes, and they were really, I couldn't stop them from twitching. And I asked my wife at the time, I asked her, did you see or hear anything? She goes, no, go back to bed. So I went in the bathroom and washed my face off with cold water to see if I can get my eyes from moving and twitching. And I said, wow, what happened? And I laid back down and I couldn't get back to sleep. This was around, I guess, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I really couldn't get back to sleep after that. My heart was kind of racing. And so I had to go to work that morning and get up at 5:30. So it was only a couple hours. So I kind of stayed up and kind of thought, what happened to me? What just happened? I think what happened at that point, because down the line, I can tell you what they did. They took semen extraction from me at that point. And that's what they do. They can do this at your bedside, or they can take you in a ship. If you're outside in your car, of course they're going to take you in the ship. But if you're in your bedroom, they can do the things they want to with you, especially a man. They can take semen, they can take DNA samples, and they can kind of visually inspect you, and then that'd be it. And you might have a mark or a scratch on you. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough, you'll find an implant that they left with you too. At that time, I didn't notice an implant, or I didn't find one. They could be in you. You don't even know it unless you're X-rayed or whatever. But who's going to X-ray their whole body to find out? Doctors won't do it, especially you tell them the reason why. But I found out that night something happened. They must have done some test on me or something there at the bedside. And I thought, why? I said, oh no, now they're back. My first thought was, they're back. But they might have been back even before then. But this was the first conscious, sighting that I had, seeing an ET. And I thought, they're back. That's the first thing that came to my mind. I said, oh my, they're back. And the next day at work, I didn't want to tell anybody because they would have thought I was crazy. So I didn't say anything about that. I mentioned it to my wife. Of course, she wasn't in the know of anything, so she didn't really care. So I didn't have anybody really to talk to. I might have told my mom, and then that's when she probably started telling me. I don't know the exact time. She started telling me about the entities that come in her room, her bedroom, the tall, lanky ones, and she said there were short ones. And I said, oh my. And I said, Mom, you and I have this kind of like the same background here. And she goes, yeah. My older brother even asked me, says, why does she tell you this stuff and not me? I said, because her and I can share. She's not afraid to talk to me because I've told her what I've seen and what has happened to me.
Pretty incredible, Dave. So any other family members experience this? I mean, is it happening as a group? I know you have a big family, and I don't know exactly who lives in the household with you, but is it something that's happening? Is it, does it worry you? Does it concern you from time to time?
Well, nothing's happened to me in the last 3 or 4 years except some telekinesis stuff that's been going on, paranormal stuff, in which I'm looking forward to Grant Cameron's research finality. But the whole family, almost half the family, saw a big triangle craft come over our neighborhood. My mom lives 4 houses down from me, and we live on a dead end street. And this huge craft, it was April 9th, it was 2011, and this thing come over our neighborhood. There's about 7 houses. Well, the width of this triangle craft covered the whole street. It was that huge. And it was only about 60 feet, 70 feet above the ground. It actually kind of scraped off the top of the tree across the road from me, coming in. And I stood there in my driveway watching this thing come over. I saw 2 big bright lights. I was talking to my brother, one of my other brothers. I got 8 brothers, or I did have. I lost one here a couple of years ago, but I was talking to him actually, and I said, I see something coming my way, and I don't know what it is. It's weird. Two big bright lights were coming, about 30 miles an hour, coming over me. And I looked up when it got over me, and I looked up underneath the belly. It had a groove right down the center of it, and in the center, it had a grate. It looked like some kind of a exhaust system or something. I heard a little hissing and buzzing sound, and I saw the two big bright lights on the end. And in the front of the craft, in which I can't explain, were two glass-looking globes that hung down about 15 feet from this craft in the front of the nose. And maybe those were that's where the power, I guess they have this anti-gravity power source that they use, and that's what causes the bright lights. So the bright lights are not for lighting; they're actually power generation for the ship itself, because these two globes in front, and they weren't shining, they weren't bright. Apparently, they didn't need those because they were flying so slow and so low. And this thing went over me, and I noticed a little red light on the back middle part of it and behind it. And I watched it go over my house, and it went south, and it went up in the clouds, and it was gone. So the first thing I did was called my mom's house, in which two of my brothers were there at the time. And I said, "Did you guys see this thing?" And my mom told me, she said, "See it?" She said, "Oh my God, I was scared to death." She said, "I was watching out of the patio doors, and she said, I was afraid to go outside." And this is something phenomenal to me, knowing my mom. She said, "I didn't want to step out on the porch," she said, "because I was afraid of being abducted." I said, "Wow, where'd you get that idea, Mom?" I said, and she looks at me kind of funny, like she knows, like I guess she's had these experiences through her life. And my other two brothers didn't step out because my mom was afraid to step out. So, but they saw the craft through the windows, and they watched it, and they were just all, they was just all up in the air. They said, "Wow, this is," and I said, "Wow, finally, I got witnesses now. I got 3 other witnesses to a UFO sighting." I called the sheriff's department, and they said they haven't gotten any calls by seeing a craft that low. And I said, "You probably think I'm crazy, right?" And dispatch lady kind of chuckled. She goes, "Mr. Emmons," she said, "no, we don't think you're crazy." She said, "Our officers see things like this every once in a while." And she said, "I think they're all believers." I said, "Wow, that's good to know." So I felt good about that sighting. My neighbors also have seen some things. These are some other smaller stories that accompany some of these larger events. My neighbors next door, they were a couple, and they were in their 50s, I guess, at the time. They saw a bright light, and they said it was in my backyard, actually, and the bright light was shining over their property, too. And they said they heard the strangest sound. It was some kind of a whining sound or something. And I said, "Did you go out on the back porch and take a look?" And they said, "Oh, no, we were too afraid. We actually hid under our bed." I said, "My God," I said, "you should have went out and taken a look." And then she told me, she said, "Does this have something to do with you, Dave?" I said, "It might have." I said, "I'm not really sure." And then the other neighbor on the other side, on another night, on another different occasion, saw a bright light come down in my backyard. And he just had his tooth pulled or something. He was taking medication. He looked out his bathroom window, and he saw this bright light, like a cone-shaped light, come down to the ground. And he said he kept watching it for a while, and he said he couldn't understand what that light was doing in my backyard. And he didn't tell me for a couple of months because he thought I'd think he was crazy. He said, he started walking away one day, we were talking, he said, "I got to tell you something." He said, I saw a bright conical-shaped light in your backyard, and he said it was really bright. He said, but I couldn't tell what it was. It was there for a few minutes, and then he said it was gone. And I said, "Don't be afraid to tell me that stuff." I said, "I'm a UFO experiencer, so I said that I know that kind of stuff happens." I said, with the experiencers a lot of times. And then my brother-in-law, who's not with us today, but he was also a skeptic about UFOs. And my brother-in-law and sister was walking out of their house. They were right down the road from me, too, about 2-3 houses. So we own the street, or the Emmons. But they come out of their house and they saw this tall man dressed in black with a black hat standing in the middle of the field in behind my house. And a storm was coming up, and his coat was blowing, his long coat. And my brother-in-law stood there and stared for a while, and he said, "For likes me, I don't know what it was." And my mom saw it at a different angle. She was looking at it from her point of view, about 4 houses down. She was looking, and she saw the same thing. And she said, "Dave, did you see anything on your property?" And I said, "No, I didn't." I said, "I didn't see this one. They're the ones who saw that." So I do have witnesses that can tell me about certain things that happen around my property, and I didn't really know it. So there's a lot of witnesses that I have that have seen things that I didn't see, but they pretty much involve me.
So did you and your mom ever get a chance to compare notes so you could finally find out what she really knows?
Yeah, she told me that they were tall, lanky figures. And I said, "Mom, what did they do?" She said, they touched me. She said, "I was frozen." And I said, "Yeah, that's typical." And she said, "But they touched me in places." And I said, "Yeah, okay, you don't have to tell me." And I think what they were doing, they were following family DNA. We have Native American Indian blood in us, probably about 15% Crow. And they said that they followed, one theory was they followed the DNA bloodline of Native Americans. And you know the story of the Hopi out west, the whole tribe disappeared, and they might have went somewhere else. But that's one of the theories about the family thing. And of course, I was told that I went to these conventions, and a lot of these people who can't remember all their names, but a lot of them done a lot of research, and they said, if you have been visited by an ET, and if you've been abducted, more than likely you have family members that's also been abducted. And they said that's a given. And so I know my mom has been. My sister, who passed away, I know there was something going on with her that she was afraid to say. She would never tell us. And then I have another brother who has seen these triangle crafts several times. And so, and my other brothers, they've seen craft come out of the clouds and drop down and just disappear. But so my family, they have seen things. Abduction-wise, I think my mom, maybe my sister, maybe one other brother, maybe has been abducted. And I had another brother who's kind of a skeptic just here a while back. I think it's been around 6 months or so ago. He said that he felt like something was pressing down on his chest. That could be, sleep paralysis. But he said no. He said I was able to look around. I said, "Did you see anything?" He said, "No, but I was just frozen." He said that like something was pushing down on me. And I said, "For real?" And he kind of chuckled a little bit because he is a disbeliever. And I said, "Now do you believe me that things happen?" And he said, "Well, I don't know what that was." I said, "Well, I can kind of tell you what it was, but I've had sleep paralysis, I guess, once or twice in my life, but I knew what it was. I kind of waited for my brain to catch up with my body, and that's what basically it is your brain is behind your body movement, just a few seconds maybe. And I know what that feeling was. They call it the old hag on your chest theory, that they can't breathe too well. But that's been written in books hundreds of years ago. But actually now the new scientific theory is those are abductions. And I know what they use when they do abduct you. There's some people who are shocked and electrocuted, like I was a couple of times. And I was conscious and very aware of what was going on. And Dr. Jacobs told me that that's what they do when they bring you back. He said that the energy that comes back with you is a shock, and that's what they're doing when they're done with you. I said, "Oh my God!" I said, "I thought that was the starting." They said, "No, that's the ending of the abduction when they bring you back and you you feel all electrified and you can't move. And I said, yeah. And that's what he told me. But I don't know exactly on my first big abduction that I was wide awake for. I've probably been abducted before. There's no doubt that the little guy did something, and then there was something else happened. I got so many of the little things, I guess paranormal things that I could talk about that would take up a lot of time. I don't know how much time you have, but I'm trying to get to the major events.
So let's get to the major event. Tell us about that and what was that experience and when was that, Dave?
Okay, and one of the major events it happened in 2010. I went to a spiritualist, or she called herself, she was part Native American. She would go into a trance and talk to her guide. So I kind of chuckled about it. A friend told me, go and talk to her, said she's really good. Well, she told me, she said, well, first thing, your back is weak, right? I said, yeah, I'll give you that. You might have seen me hump over a little bit when I walked through the door. I said, and I chuckled. I said, yeah, I'll give you that one. And she said, the second thing, she says, your car is going to be damaged. She said, you're going on a trip soon, aren't you? She didn't know I was going on a trip. But 9 days later, I planned on going to Sedona, Arizona. And she said, you're going on a trip. And I said, yes. And she said, your car is going to be damaged, but you'll be able to you'll finish the trip. And she says, here's the final thing I want to tell you. She says, you're going to meet your first ET on October 4th. And she said, where are you going to be at that time? I said, I guess I might be in Sedona. She said, that's where you're going to meet your first ET. Well, lo and behold, when I got to Sedona, I napped a couple hours because I drove 26 straight hours. So I took a couple hours nap and I felt really, really good. Got up, went to this gift shop, and they said there was a UFO sighting at Cathedral Rock. So I said, okay, I'll go there. So I took my camera and I pulled out my camera, started filming, and pulled in behind me a white little car, and then out steps this Japanese young lady. She must have been in her early 30s or maybe 35. I couldn't really tell the age, but she walked up to me like a little puppy, and I was filming her, and I said, "Are you going for a hike on the trail, or are you waiting for some people?" She goes, "No people." And I said, "You gonna hike?" And I said, "It might start raining." And at that time, it started sprinkling. So I told her, I said, "Do you want to get in the car and we can talk?" And so she got in the car, and I asked her, I said, "Are you afraid of me, a big old brute like me?" She goes, "No." I said, "Well, you can kick my butt then." I was trying to be funny and joke with her. She goes, "Yes, I can." I said, "Whoa." And she said it very seriously. She had nothing on her. She had no cell phone, no purse, no makeup, no earrings, no rings, nothing. She just had a light white-like sweater, and she had blue jeans on, denim. And there was a mud streak pattern on one of her legs of her jeans that she said she's been hiking, and she got dirty. But most young ladies I know would actually change clothes and not wear the same one all the time, especially with the mud on it. So she talked, and she was trying to elicit emotions out of me, in which right away I kind of read this book that they walk among us, and I read some other books that said that these people that are hybrid will try to elicit emotions from you, and they'll be real friendly to you, and they'll attach themselves to you, and that's exactly what she was doing. But next to me pulled in another car, and it was a young guy, maybe 25, maybe a little older. He had a short haircut, and he had a headset on, and he did not look at me one time. I felt it was kind of strange. He didn't move. He just stayed there. And I looked at him, and I looked at her, and she kind of gave me a look like everything's okay. She had really dark eyes, and they were piercing. And when she looked at me, I just can feel the energy. It just went to the back of my head, and I told her, I said, Hiroko, that was her name, or at least that's what she said. I said, your eyes are so piercing, they're just going to the back of my head. And I said, wow. And I said, I thought my eyes were strong. I said, and then she went on to talk, and this guy pulled out, and then she went on to talk about that she said, what would you do if this fellow employee that you're working with didn't like you and always made things rough on you. I said, well, I tried to talk to him. I said, we couldn't talk. I said, we just keep our distance. I said, but never take it into a fight or a feud. Just back away from it. And she goes, yeah. And she said, then she started crying. It was a put-on cry. I knew it was put on, and I thought, she doesn't know how to cry too good. And I suspected her kind of right off the bat because of the strangeness. And then this guy pulls in again, this young guy with a headset. And I thought, this is getting scary. I turned to her and I said, do you know him? I said, this guy bothers me. I said, is this a setup? And she looks at me, and when she looked at me, she kind of told me, never mind, don't go for that gun in your console. I had a license to carry a gun. I had a gun in my console. I was looking at the console, and I was about ready to get it out. And it's kind of like she looked at the console and looked at me, and she knew exactly what was in there. And she was reading my mind. And I told her, I said, I hope this is not a setup. And then I just relaxed. He pulled out, and then he come in the third time, and I was actually kind of used to it. He was kind of keeping track of her. I guess he was her security. There's a sponsor. If you read these books about hybrids, there's a sponsor. There's a security person that supports them. The sponsor is an earthling that helps them navigate the human social life. And then there's security that keeps track of her to make sure that she doesn't get into some trouble or she does something wrong or lo and behold, she has to, melt me down or whatever. But that's how I felt. The whole thing was coming together like that. And I talked to her a little bit more. I said, how old are you? She looked at me really stern. She said, why you worry about age? She said, there is no age. I said, yes, there is, but I'm not going to argue with you. I said, I didn't want her eyes to burn through my head. So I said, yes, okay, we'll forget about it. So what happened was I told her, I said, okay, it's getting late now. We've been an hour and a half talking. And so we took off. And I told her, I said, I'll meet you for breakfast the next day if you got to leave the next day. And she goes, okay. And I told her where. Apparently she was able to find her way there. And we met there and had breakfast. She didn't eat much. And then we went touring around Sedona. Then we went back to another place and had a piece of it. She left. And then when she left, she just waved her hand at me and she wanted the pictures. I took about 9 pictures, and I had the 9 pictures, but she wanted copies of those pictures. And she gave me some email address. I guess it was an email dump that everything went into. And I sent her the pictures, and she was happy about that. And I didn't hear from her anymore after that until April the following year. And this was in Godfrey. My cousin and I was sitting, and this is the second fact that proved to me that something was weird. And this person, I had some doubts after the meeting in Sedona. I had some doubts about what am I believing here about her? Am I believing that she's a hybrid? Well, I need to prove that. I don't really know just yet. So April 11th, this was I think a couple of days or so after the big sighting I had. This was March 17th. This was St. Patrick's Day. I'm sorry. I got my dates messed up. It's St. Patrick's Day, about 72 degrees, really nice outside for Illinois, March 17th. Cousin and I was sitting on the porch smoking cigars, in which I shouldn't have done, but we did. But we were smoking cigars, and here come these 3 Asian people walking towards us about 200 feet away, and they were walking from the road and couldn't figure out where they came from. And then about halfway, the lady, in which was dressed just like Kuroko, folded her arms just like Kuroko did. She turned her face away from me, about 125 feet, 140 feet away from me, something like that. She turned away from me so I couldn't see her face. And these 2 young Japanese guys, maybe 15 and 17 years of age, come up the driveway. And my cousin said, he said, who are these Chinese? Do you know them? I said, they're not Chinese, they're Japanese. I said, I might know them. And they walked up to us, and they asked one question: where was the new Walmart? And it was the overpass. And that was a strange question, to be walking that distance and coming that without any transportation, no car or anything. And so they stood there. And while they stood there, we were dumbed down. This is the feeling I was telling you. I felt really like I was high on some kind of alcohol or something, and I couldn't say anything. I couldn't talk. I was wanting to ask him if that was Hiroko. And my cousin, he's a big time talker. I mean, he'll ask people 1,001 questions in just 5 minutes. He didn't say a word. I was wondering at that time what was wrong with him. He wasn't even talking, and neither was I. And as they were standing there, they just looked at me and looked at him, and I didn't really realize until later that one of them walked in my house and got a hold of a brown satchel. It was actually a pleather. It wasn't leather. It was pleather that I used to carry my UFO notes. Well, he looked into it, and he looked over at me while he was looking into that satchel. And at the time, I couldn't figure out what he was doing because I guess I was dumbed down. And they have you like, I don't know if you've ever been in an operation where they give you a twilight shot.
Sure. Yeah.
That's what it feels like. It feels like that everything's okay, everything's fine. These two, then they started walking away after that. And then when they got about halfway to the girl, I noticed them, and my cousin didn't notice them until they was almost to the highway. And he said, "What just happened?" I said, "I'll tell you later." And we watched them as they went to the road, and no sooner we said something to each other, we looked and they were gone. They didn't go down the road or up the road because we could see both ways very well. And they didn't get in no car. They were just gone, just disappeared. And he said, he got up and he says, "I don't know about you, Dave." He said, "I know that you've been involved with these ET stuff." He said, "But this is crazy." He said, "I'm scared shitless." And he said, I'm going to leave. So he got in this truck and he took off. And I asked his wife the next day. She said, "Oh, yeah, he was really scared." She said, "What happened?" And I told her. And this is when I kind of figured out that this person, Hiroko, was for real.
So I would have the same reaction. I mean, that would scare the shit out of me as well. So why not you? What's your reaction is different? You don't seem to be intimidated. You don't seem to be worried. You don't seem to be, have a feeling of lack of control, which I think I would. Do you feel in control of the situation? Do you know where it's going? I mean, summarize this whole thing in what you've told me tonight. Where do you think it's going? And what is your purpose in it?
I think my purpose has been served already, Cameron, because actually I haven't had any really. My wife and I have seen a couple of UFOs in the sky at night traveling on the interstate highway. She saw it. She always looks up now and she'll ask me, she said, "Is that a UFO?" And I'll say, "No." I mean, I can identify them since I've seen 5 of them. I know, you
Right.
watch for the aeronautical lights on a plane or a helicopter, and so you know which is which. But what I think the sad thing, and this is, I have a buddy that writes books, ghost books, and he's into everything paranormal. He told me that I was brave. He said that I have enough stories to write a screenplay for Steven Spielberg. I said yes, I do, and they're all true. And he said, "You're not afraid." He said, "You go out to Sedona and you keep going out there looking for this stuff." I said, "Yes, I do. I'm looking for answers. If I can be a platoon leader in combat and be cool and calm, I can do this." I said to myself, I want to know who these people are, who these entities are, what are they doing, and I want to find out some stuff or some technological stuff that I can kind of chew on for a while, but I never get it. The only technological stuff I see is what I see on the craft, and I do. Afterwards, I had a regression about the lodge that I'm staying in when I met this hybrid gal, and I had the regressed dream that I was in my room in the lodge, and I was right in the place where I usually sleep, and I had this dream where my one right leg was in the air, the knee, and they had this little tan brown hose going towards my groin area. one of the comments that she made to me the night before, or the next day after that, is that she told me that she needed a baby. And I said, "Are you married?" She goes, "No." She says, "Not married." I said, "Why do you need a baby?" And so that was kind of a giveaway for that night. I guess later on that night, the people that she was with come there and extracted DNA from me, or semen from me. And because I looked down, I saw the brown hose, and I was real sleepy and groggy. I tried to kick it away, and all of a sudden, when I tried to kick it away, I fell back to sleep again. So I didn't know what happened after that. But the regressed dream that I had a couple of years later told me what happened. They got me up out of the bed. One of them had me by the right elbow, and the other one was at my left side, shining a light in my eyes and my face. It was about 6 inches long. It was a tubular-shaped light. And I remember it was bright. And every time it hit my eyes, it hurt. So I turned my head, and I saw another person or entity sitting at this little table in the room. And I was looking at the patio doors of the lodge, and they walked me back and forth to the patio doors, and they were taking this light in my face. And I knew 2 years later exactly what they were doing. It was erasing my memory. And just about a month ago, scientists come out and said that they can change your memory by light frequencies. Not ETs, but we can. They're working on that now, that they can actually change our brains or our memories just by a light frequency. And I thought to myself, well, I knew that 6 years ago or 7 years ago. And they're finally starting to talk about it, that light frequencies can control brain memory and thinking. And I thought, oh boy, all this is kind of coming together, and I'm picking up these little facts and these little tools that I can use to determine the truth.
Incredible, Dave. Go ahead.
Cameron, I can tell you right now, it's the truth. Little things still happen today. Like I told you, the little airports that at Grant Cameron, he took. I got pictures of the airports that he wanted.
Right.
He's going to put it in his book. He's going to put those in his book. He was fascinated by the 4 different colored plastic little discs that I have. They were left. One of them was left in the bathroom right in front of me. When I bent down, I looked. That was the first one. I thought, okay, the first one that probably come off of a piece of clothing or something. So I put it on the dresser. And I think it was about a month later, I was changing my pants at the bedside, and I looked down, and there was another one. This one, the first one was kind of like a dark gray. This one was kind of like an eggshell white. And I put the discs together. They had the exact same size, exact same width. And I thought, oh boy, something's not right. And I said, I even looked all over the house to see if I can find them anywhere, or I looked on the internet to see if I could find the size. These were smaller than the ones I found on the internet. The little bingo plastic things that you put on your bingo card.
Sure.
Well, I was looking for those game chips, they call them, and I couldn't find any of them that was this size. They were, so it was kind of. I thought the second one, that was weird. Okay, and then the wife and I, she got a job up in Fairbanks, Alaska, at the DOD, the military base, and so we went up there, and we were leasing a house from a couple people, and he was a scientist, and he worked at the Fairbanks College there, University of Alaska, and he worked there on the government jobs, and he did a lot of government scientific things in the Arctic, and he worked with the biological sciences. He was an older gentleman. He was about 5 years older than me. And his wife, they were really nice, a couple. They were from India and very smart. And I went with him to a couple of meetings with a Rotary Club. And these were all scientists and everything. I sat there and I felt, wow, I'm in high cotton now, with all these scientists. So we had a lunch and met. And then I come home, I changed clothes. I reached in my pocket to empty out my left pocket, and something was sticking to my finger. And when I pulled it out, it was another disc. And this time it was kind of like a copper colored disc. I looked at it, oh no. I sat down on the edge of the bed and this thing still stuck to my finger. And I had chills all up and down my whole body. That was the scary one. Who could have put that in my pocket when I checked my pockets before I left the house? And they were empty when I put things in. And then all of a sudden, I was at this meeting, and somebody put a little disc in my pocket. And that was the one that really scared me. About 6 months later, the wife, actually, we were walking towards the car, and there was a red one in the snowpack. It wasn't there very long because it would have been punched down in the snow further. So it was timed just right to where she looked at it first and she said, "Honey, is that one of those red discs?" And I picked it up and I said, "Yeah, it is. It's the same disc." So explain that, explain what those are. And but Brent Cameron's got the idea that they could be telekinesis, that we're doing it ourselves. We're drawing things from another dimension. I don't know. It's a theory that he's working on.
So do you still feel like you're connected and can, at will, maybe summon some sort of visitation, or is there a disconnect and is this going to be a thing of the past real soon?
Well, I see little things happening. Just yesterday, something happened weird, and the wife and I we don't know what happened. She was making eggs, and there was a couple eggs left in the carton. And I told her, I said, there's another carton in the refrigerator, and she goes, oh, and she didn't need any more eggs. She was done. She just had the two. And so she told me, she said, "Did you put those eggs on the counter?" I said, "No, I didn't." She said, "I didn't either." She said, "Now the eggs are out of the refrigerator and on the counter." I guess what happened during our conversation, there must have been some telekinetic energy that put these things where they're supposed to be. And I've had other things that happen. I've had some of my UFO material disappear just here a while back, and it was some of my notes, and it was those 4 discs and a couple other things that I had that was dropped off to me. And they were gone. I couldn't find them. And for a whole month, I tried to figure out what went on. Where are they at? And I looked in the same box for the 3rd time. I looked in there, and there they were. They were in the box. But they weren't there 2 other times when I checked them. These are the crazy little things that happen. This telekinetic, dimensional, whatever. I do know there's another side to all this. And in that first big abduction I had where I was almost electrocuted, I heard this snapping and crackling next to my bed is really loud. It was like taking a big box of saltine crackers and stomping them with your feet. And I turned around to take a look at what it was, and then that energy hit me on the shoulder, on the right shoulder. I was laying on the bed, and it was broad daylight, 1:30, and I wasn't sleeping because I had my left arm up, and I was kind of leaning towards the headboard. And I could see out the door. It's bright and sunny that day. It was 1:30. Like I said, I just laid there to stretch my back. And then all this happened in just that short period of time that I laid there. But I remember feeling really tired at the computer. I was doing some paperwork at the computer. And I thought, well, I'll rest my back. And I went and laid down. That's when it happened. And then I tried to move, and then it hit me again. And it kind of hurt. Yeah, it hurt, but everything was just numb. I couldn't move. I couldn't move anything. Just my eyes. I could see out the door. And then I heard a voice say, "Dave, you can do it. Come on, you can do it." And that was my sister's voice, who died 4 years earlier. And I thought, "Sissy, come to the door where I can see you. Come to the door." So I was very conscious. I could see out the door. I knew the sunlight. She said, I can't. And then at the edge of my fingers, my left hand, there was a little hand that dropped in my fingers. And I felt of it, and they were baby fingers. So I pulled on the fingers, and I pulled on the palm, and there was actually a baby's hand. I thought, oh my, what is going on here? And I was able to think, and I was able to see out the door, but nowhere else. And then something heavy sat beside me at my hip, and I felt, oh my goodness, what's next? And then that's when I kind of lost it. I do get scared, just at the final moment when I don't know, I'm not in control, is I think when I get most scared. And I hollered out, "God help me." and a few seconds later, it was gone. I was able to move. And that was the biggest abduction, I guess, thing that's ever happened. And I was shocked again one other time. It was about a month later. It visited me again, hit me on my right shoulder again, and I tried to push away from it. And I thought I pushed it away. And Dr. Jacob said, no, you didn't push it away. They were done with you. And that's when I was really surprised. So that's part of my conscious abductions. There was 3 of them. I had my finger almost blown off, the tip of it, from that electrical power, and I wasn't anywhere near electrical devices in the bed. And that's where they usually mess with me, was in my bed, because I was single at the time when most of this happened. So that was an easy thing for them to do. I didn't even have a dog at that time either. So those are the experiences that I can't explain. I haven't had those experiences lately. I've had some kind of like weird dreams, or some things like knocking or something, and that could be dimensional. A lot of people think they're ghosts, but actually that could be ET or dimensional entities. And my wife would hear them, and she says, "Your friends are back." So see, she knows my history. She knows things have happened between her and I with these entities. And she said, "Your friends are back." And so I said, wow. I said, I don't want to scare her. She's not really afraid. She tries to, she just prays to God that nothing's negative or nothing's evil, and the evil stays away from us. I don't think they're negative or evil. They've hurt me a couple of times. They pulled down on my right foot one night, and it almost like broke the big toe. Whatever it was, it pulled down pretty hard. I think they did that to wake me up after an abduction. So I've had a heart condition, so maybe they might know that. And that's why people ask me, so Dave, didn't you ever go through a horrific, painful abduction? I said, not really. I said, some people go through some horrific things that happen to them, but sometimes it's hard for me to believe some of the things that people are consciously aware of and seeing. And Travis Walton, the reason why they took him on board ship is because they killed him. They stopped his heart, and he believes that to this day. But that's why they drug him back on board ship. And there was an object that was laying over his chest. It was like a little, I guess, a little table or whatever that they were doing stuff. They brought him back to life, and he jumped off the table. So his circumstances were kind of different in that way, that I think he was able to see the little ETs, the grays that were messing with him or doing things with him. And he kind of chased them out of the room, and then he walked around the ship and he saw some things. And if you know his story, then I don't need to go any further on it, but his story is very believable. He had 5 days lost time, and he had a beard, and he showed up on the side of the road, and they dropped him off and they flew away. But he ran into tall Nordics, he said shapely human beings, very tall, 7 feet or more. And he said they were very beautiful people. Said there was a man and a woman. He thought they were with NASA, and he thought he was being saved, but he wasn't. These were ET. They were the tall Nordics. And so that's when they put him out with a face mask. They didn't want to put him out anymore with any other device, maybe electrocution or anything because of his heart. They're afraid they're going to stop his heart, so they put a mask over his face and put him out. And that's when he said he found himself laying beside the road. So each person has a different experience.
Very different experiences. So in your opinion, or is it your wish that this chapter in your life be over? Do you want to lead a normal life, whatever that might be from now on? Or do you want the learning, the experiencing to continue to fulfill some other part?
I'd like to meet these entities that have done this to me or worked with me or encountered me. I've seen other things. I've seen like strange people. These are walking amongst us. There was I can tell you a couple of quick stories here. I was at a nightclub with my 2 brothers, and we were going to sign a contract to play there. This was back in I think 2012, and this girl was in a black dress. She was with other girls from a party or something, and she was in some kind of a black gown or something. And she was about 24, 25. She went over and she played a Michael Jackson tune, and she started dancing. And she was swirling around the bar and the stools and stuff. Then she danced over to me with her hands out, and she looked at me. And I thought, wow, why is a young, attractive woman like that dancing towards me and not my two younger brothers, in which were better looking than me? And I thought, something's wrong here. And I think what it was that she knew that my DNA was charged. They call it, I heard the name called enlightenment. When you get charged by these ETs or spiritually, you're enlightened. And maybe that's the term they use when your DNA, I have electrical charges in me, matter of fact, so they're picking up on that. But I didn't think nothing of it at that time. About 2 weeks later, we were in there to finish out the contract talk, and we were sitting at the bar, my other brother and I, and there was this girl about a seat or so away from me. And I asked my brother, I said, isn't that the same girl who was in that dress here about 2 weeks ago? He goes, yes. And said, it looks like it. And she just had a tank top, and she had denims on. And she sat there, and when I looked around at her, her eyes moved, but her head didn't. And when her eye moved over to the far right, there was a slit. It looked like a lizard eye. It was green with a green slit. I froze. I sat there and I turned back around and I froze. I asked my brother, I said, did you see that? He said, see what? I said, never mind, I'll tell you later. But that was, I think, somebody walking around and shape-shifting. I guess you've heard of that
Sure.
That science of shape-shifting. The Indians know a lot about it. They don't even want to talk about it. So, but that was a shape-shifting situation that I noticed. And they do notice people that have had implants. You're marked. They can tell by some kind of aura. I had another guy that told me his experience. He was in the military, in the Air Force, and he was in this nightclub. And he said there was this really gorgeous girl that come up to him. And he said he was tall, lanky. He didn't think he was anything special. But he said she said, what's your phone number? What room are you at? And he told her. And later that night, he went to bed. He didn't think she was coming, but she showed up. He said about 2 o'clock in the morning somewhere. And she come in, and she practically raped him, he said. And he said they had sex for a little while. She got dressed and just walked out, and that was it. So he thinks that was some kind of a hybrid that was collecting semen, whatever, in a different way, I guess. But yeah, I've heard stories of that nature, and I've seen people just disappear on me. I had a guy, I was in Cabela's looking for some sharks to go out west. Apparently, they know your every move. They know where you're going to be. They have some control of time. They know where you're going to be in the future, and that's where they meet you, and that's the intersect that they have with you. Well, I was in this Cabela's, and I was standing there looking at the sharks at a round rack, and here walks a guy in, looks like about a $500-600 suit. He was about 6'4" or 5", kind of a big guy, close cropped hair, looked like an FBI agent. He stood there and stared at me. And I was looking at him, I was thinking, well, what's going on here? Why is he standing there and staring at me? Didn't utter a word, didn't say a word, but he just kept staring at me. And I thought, okay, I put the sharks in my cart, and I looked at him, and he was still standing there. And I said, I don't know what to say to this guy. What's up? But he finally kind of gave me a dirty look, and he turned around and walked away. He went down this aisle. I followed him around that aisle, and he was gone, just disappeared. I think these are dimensional entities or human entities that come in and out the veil, the thin veil that is with the dimension.
What do you tell our listeners? I mean, if you were to if you wanted them to in one short paragraph to put all this information together in order to process it, what do you want them to know?
I want them to know that there's another side. There's a dimensional side. We're very close to it. And when you hear people talk about dimensions, That's what the ETs, I think, use a lot of times to cross over. Also, ETs are invisible. So if there's like paranormal activity or a poltergeist, that could very easily be an ET that has crossed over, or either that or come from a ship, and they're just here, moseying around, looking at things or checking people out. But what I'd like for people to know is that, number one, I'm truthful. I have no reason to lie and make this stuff up. It's happened to me. Do I feel like I've been blessed in a way? Yes. Some of this stuff makes me feel very spiritual, and people can actually get a spiritual feeling out of having that type of encounter with a dimensional, or with a hybrid, or with an ET. A lot of times, but I hear a lot of horror stories in which sometimes I'm wondering if the pain that they have, or the horror that they have, are just attached to bad dreams that they have about a situation that they're not familiar with. They may not hurt them too much at all, but they might think afterwards it was horrible, and they remember different things about it. That could be the difference in the different experiences. But to sum it up, yes, I would like to know more. And for the people out there who's listened to me, I'd like to tell them this is truthful. And I hope that someday that they get a chance to see a UFO up close. I don't wish for them to be abducted. I don't want anybody to have to go through that, because some people can't handle it. Some people have a weaker constitution, or they're not as brave as some other people. And since I'm a callous combat veteran, maybe that helped me get through some of this fear. But I just told you, I did have fear a couple of times, and the fear goes away. But then after that, you say, I want to know why. And then the big question is, and I want other people to know, a lot of experiences ask the question, why me? We talked about the DNA, we talked about the family thing, we talked about Native American blood. So the why me is very questionable. 50% of the people on Earth have been touched by ETs or abducted, and they don't even really realize it. That's what I want to sum that up to, that they probably have had experiences they can't explain, and what has happened is they've been abducted.
Good thoughts. And when you ask, why me, also ask, why not me? It's been great to have Dave Emmons in the studio tonight and get firsthand insight into his experience of the unknown. Dave Emmons, it's been amazing to speak with you tonight. Nice to finally meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cameron, and thank you for allowing me to talk about this on the radio, because I want the truth out there.
My Alien Life Podcast.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by ELEON. You can find all ELEON's work online at Heart Dance Records.